Whatever the reason that you are intermittent fasting, there are some things that you could be doing wrong that could be killing your results. So today I'm going to go over the top 5 mistakes that people make when they are intermittent fasting. And number 1 is overindulging, specifically on the wrong foods. Now, one of the biggest reasons that people start intermittent fasting is to start cutting calories. So if you want to lose weight and you start cutting out a meal, and instead of eating 3 meals a day, you start eating 2 meals a day. That's one of the easiest ways to start cutting out your calories. But if you start overindulging on those 2 meals that you get to start making up for that lack of that 3rd meal, then you're not going to be getting any of those benefits. Now, what can make this even worse is if you start eating the wrong foods. On the days that you're not fasting, you want to really make sure that you're getting all the right nutrients. It's really easy when you break your fast to just go have half a tub of ice cream. But if you're watching your calories and you're consuming all that junk, then you might be getting under your calorie limit, but you're not going to be getting the necessary nutrients. I had a friend in college and he was doing this diet where he would eat really light for 6 days out of the week, but the 7th day, he was allowed to eat everything he wanted. Now, he took that very literally. I mean, this guy was eating all the junk food he could get his hands on. He was eating cookies, cakes, ice cream, all these desserts, but hardly any of the foods that he was eating had the right nutrients. Now, I'm not saying you can't enjoy yourself, but you want to make sure you're eating foods under your calorie limit, but also getting the right nutrients. Now, number 2 is you're not eating enough. Now, I'm specifically talking about protein. Now, going back to the last scenario, if someone is cutting their calories and they're getting to their calorie limit, but all they're eating is junk food, then they're going to be depriving themselves of nutrients. And one nutrient in particular that we need is protein. A lot of people are simply lacking in the amount of protein that they're getting every day. And I think part of the reason for that is right now the RDA, or the recommended daily amount of protein, is a joke. Right now the RDA for protein intake is about 0.8 grams per kilogram of your body weight. So if you weigh 170 pounds, that will equate to about 62 grams of protein in a day. Now, what people don't tell you is that's enough protein to survive, but it's not enough to be healthy. Because to be healthy, you want to make sure you're eating enough protein to maintain your muscle strength. So ideally, you're going to want to try to double or even triple that RDA to get enough protein. Now, some people have this impression that low protein diets are better for you because low protein diets help you live longer. But a lot of this data has been from studies on mice, and restricting protein in mice helps them live longer. But if you start looking at the data on humans, you'll see the exact opposite. And you'll see that the more protein humans eat, the longer that they live. And here's another study just to show that the RDA right now for protein is not enough. This study showed that when elderly people consume the recommended daily amount of protein, that they end up losing muscle mass in just 2 weeks. And we have multiple studies showing that when people eat more than the RDA of protein, it actually benefits them. This study is called the Healthy ABC study, and it looked at over 2,000 healthy adults over the course of a few years. What they found is people who ate the most protein and kept it at about 18% of their total calories were able to maintain the most lean muscle mass compared to the people that were on the lowest end of their protein consumption. And also in this study, the low protein group lost about 40% more lean muscle mass compared to the high protein group. And you don't have to double or triple your protein intake to get some benefits. Studies have shown that even slightly increasing your protein intake can slow your muscle loss as you age. Now, when does it become too much? Because there's always an upper limit to how much you can eat. Well, for protein, it's really hard to eat too much protein. The upper limit for protein is about 3.7 grams per kilogram or 1.7 grams per pound. So for a 170 pound person, that would be about 289 grams of protein in a day. Now, obviously, you should talk to your doctor and make sure that there's nothing stopping you from eating more protein. But I would recommend on the days that you're not fasting to eat like you normally would, just focus more on the protein. And that might mean cutting out some of your food from other food groups like carbohydrates and increasing your percentage of your protein that you're eating. Now, mistake number 3 is you are not fasting long enough. So there are different types of fasting. One type is a time-restricted eating window where people eat 1 or 2 meals a day, and that eating window will last about 4 to 8 hours, and then for the rest of the day, they're not going to be eating. Other types of fasting are longer duration fasts, like an alternate day fast, where one day they're fasting and the next day they're eating. And some people even do longer day fasts, where they go 3 or more days with just drinking water and not eating. So studies show that people get more benefits from an alternate day fasting or a longer fasting than people who are do just a time-restricted eating window. So a typical model for a time-restricted eating window is a 16-8 fast, where they're fasting and not eating for 16 hours out of the day, but then for the 8 hours, that's their eating window. Now, just to backtrack a little bit, this original 16-8 model came from studies on mice, and we already talked about studies on mice versus studies on humans. But the problem with looking at mice in these studies is that a mouse only lives for about 2 to 3 years. And a mouse will die after not eating for 48 hours. As opposed to humans, humans can survive for a whole month without food. So a 16-hour fast in a human is equivalent to a multiple day fast in a mouse. And just to further show this 2020 study looked at 116 volunteers doing this 16 8-hour fast. And they found no significant weight loss or any metabolic benefits when people were doing this type of fasting. Now, luckily, the research on longer periods of fasting looks a lot better. This study was published in Obesity, and it was looking at different types of fasting. And the researchers found that alternate day fasting has the highest efficacy for weight loss when compared with simple time-restricted eating. Now, does that mean that if you're doing a time-restricted eating every day and you're just eating 1 or 2 meals a day that you should stop if it's working for you? Well, no, because you're still getting the other benefits from intermittent fasting and you could still be cutting calories. But the data for this is not as good as longer periods of fasting. Now, you can even take this one step further and go into multiple days of fasting. And after a few days of fasting, your body will enter a state called starvation ketosis. This is when your body stops using glucose as a fuel source and it starts using your body's fat. And the other cool thing about this is your body starts having more ketones, and having a higher amount of ketones will cause you to feel less hungry. And you can also help achieve this ketosis by cutting out carbs. And this is why people go on the keto diet. Now, if you're someone who's happy with their weight and they're doing fasting because it's convenient, then you don't have to do this. But if you're someone that's overweight and you're trying to fix your metabolism and you feel like you've reached this plateau, then entering ketosis can help you. Number 4 is not eating your meals earlier. It is well known that we are more insulin sensitive in the morning versus the evening. That means that our insulin works a lot better earlier in the day. And that also means that the glucose in the foods that we eat, we're way more likely to turn that glucose into fuel versus storing it as fat. So this was a 12-week study, and it found that when you start your meals earlier, it can help you lose weight. So this study had 2 groups. The first group ate their first meal at 6:48 in the morning, and the second group ate their first meal at 8:11 in the morning. The group that ate their meals earlier had about 3.6% weight loss, and the group that ate their meal a little later had about 2.2% weight loss. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to eat at those exact times, but eating earlier could be a way to help maximize the use of your insulin and not store as much fat. Now, number 5, and the last mistake you're making with intermittent fasting, is you are not working out while fasting. Let's face it, there's really no way of getting around it. If you fast, you are way more likely to lose muscle compared to someone else. So if you're fasting, you really want to focus on your muscle strength, because the best indicator we have for not only how long you're going to live, but how healthy you will be, is your muscle strength. Now, the scary thing is we lose our muscle strength about 2 to 3 times faster than our muscle mass. And the reason for that is the atrophy or the dying off of our fast twitch muscle fibers as we age. So it's really important to focus from an early age on resistance training and maintaining and building muscle. Now, here's a study just to show how fast people can lose muscle as they age. So this study took 12 healthy volunteers with the average age of 67. What they found is after just 10 days of them being on bed rest, they lost an average of 3.3 pounds of lean muscle mass. And the worst part is, as you get older, it gets harder and harder to build that lean muscle back up. But luckily, if you are fasting and you're still working out, you can still maintain a lot of that lean muscle. So this study found that when you pair intermittent fasting with resistance training, that you can maintain your lean muscle mass while still burning fat. And it can help turn over your body composition. Now, on the other hand, if you're actually trying to gain weight and gain muscle, intermittent fasting might not be the best for you. But just remember, if you're gonna be fasting, make sure you're working out. Actually, regardless, you should be working out. If you go to the gym but you struggle with timing your meals correctly and making sure you get enough protein, then I have some great news for you. What if I told you that there is literally no upper limit to the amount of protein that we can absorb after a workout? For a long time, we were told that the most amount of protein